Good morning. My name is Remmelgas, and as it was already introduced, I come from the Estonian Ministry of the Environment, and I work there as an advisor in the climate department. Today, I will give you a short overview on peatlands in the context of Estonian climate policy. Estonia has set a national climate neutrality goal for 2050. And in order to reach this objective, we need to ensure that all sectors will contribute, which also means strengthening the role of the land use change and forestry sector in the climate action. The LULUCF sector plays a key role in natural carbon removal, which is essential in terms of balancing the remaining greenhouse gas emissions to achieve net zero by 2050. But at the same time, it is important to consider the long-term perspective when planning additional measures for LULUCF, as the impact of many measures will continue to have a long-term impact, both in terms of carbon balance and socioeconomic aspects. Therefore, it is important to keep in mind that although increasing carbon sequestration is important for achieving climate goals, reducing emissions will remain. But now, coming to the role of peatlands, in order to meet the climate objectives, it is important to support sustainable land use, including the continued conversion of agricultural land on peat soils to permanent grassland. And where appropriate, the restoration of natural water regime or the controlled raising of water levels could be an approach. Wetland cultivation diversifies land use and economic activities and could therefore be one of the directions to be applied in peatlands. Though the suitable areas and the long-term positive effects of these activities on nature, climate, and economy are yet to be identified. The areas suitable for wetland cultivation depend to a large extent on the location and its technical conditions, as well as the ownership of the land. And therefore, it is difficult to promote wetland cultivation on a large scale. For land managers, the economic viability is an important aspect in addition to the benefits of biodiversity and water protection. And therefore, in order to encourage land managers to engage more seriously in wetland cultivation, the economic viability needs to be ensured. In Estonia, 63% of agricultural land is leased, and land ownership is fragmented. Drainage systems are substantial and include mineral soils. And therefore, raising the water level on peat soils requires a lot of administrative efforts and entrepreneurship. In addition to agricultural land on peat soils, it is also important to address peatlands damaged and abandoned by peat production. Most of our greenhouse gas emissions from peatlands are related to peat extraction sites. Estonia has adopted an action plan for protected mires up until 2023 in order to foster conservation and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystem services of mire habitats in protected areas. So it sets a target to restore a near natural water regime of at least 20,000 hectares of mires damaged by drainage, and to restore also 2,000 hectares of abandoned peat production sites. Restoration work has been or is currently carried out on more than 12,000 hectares, and restoration of at least 5,000 hectares more has been planned, mostly without the EU funds. Unfortunately, there is still a large number of exhausted and abandoned peat extraction sites, which are a great source of greenhouse gas emissions. Restoring the water regime of those peat extraction sites would decrease greenhouse gas emissions and eventually allowing recovery of carbon sequestration by both ecosystems. It is important to prefer peat extraction from the areas that are already degraded and difficult and expensive to restore instead of opening new mines. Areas that are degraded by drainage should be prioritized to identify the needs for and sequence of their rehabilitation and restoration. Also, further drainage of natural peatlands should be avoided in order to limit greenhouse gas emissions. We also need to continue restoration of peat production sites and speed up the restoration work to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in order to achieve our climate objectives. But to achieve this, there is a need to create a support measure for restoring peat extraction sites, and the support mechanism for land use change is needed both for the surrounding landowners and miners, because wetlands must remain the same land category after 20 years from the date of conversion, and this is a big challenge for land managers. The voluntary carbon market has not yet been regulated, but it is already a growing market. And we witness an increasing interest of the private sector to contribute locally, meaning preferring local and the EU projects. Though we see that there is still a lack of clarity and challenges to be addressed when it comes to voluntary carbon market in terms of transparency, clarity, and also in terms of environmental integrity. Another important aspect is to ensure that trading with carbon credits should not become as a separate goal, but instead it should motivate land managers to use management practices and techniques that contribute to climate objectives. From the state's as well as the sector's perspective, it is also important that peatland restoration activities have a positive result compared to the current situation when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. And that the impact can be reflected in the national greenhouse gas inventories. There are currently a number of interlinked processes affecting the development of the voluntary carbon market that we are following closely. And the Estonian Ministry of the Environment is also in process of assessing the state's role, of course, in line with the Paris Agreement and the EU regulations, in terms of creating the better clarity and greater integrity of voluntary carbon market. Therefore, we also welcome the EU's approach to increase the accounting transparency of carbon sequestration at the EU level, but also taking into account the current and planned framework of the EU climate regulation that sets high national targets and where voluntary mechanisms cannot replace compliance with emission reduction commitments. Thank you.